Imagine a world where women have more time to explore their genius. Welcome to She Rebel Radio, the podcast for women leaders and founders ready to unlearn conventional rules and lead their businesses of significance. Held for counter status quo ideas and a whole dose of feminine perspective, this is our 10th series. My name's Lulu Mintz. I host retreats and create spaces for women leaders to explore their genius. And today, I'm going to create that same space right here for you on this podcast.
Welcome to episode 140 of She Rebel Radio. Help, what self-empowerment books shall I read? We are back, ladies, for our summer series of She Rebel Radio post-elections. I don't know how empowered you are feeling. I think this is the most despondent many of us have been, and I thought focusing on empowerment is going to be a really powerful point for us for this series. As women, we know it is a really useful subject for us to visit and revisit given our history. And I shared recently on my social media 3 really great self-empowerment books that I feel like everyone should read. So I'm going to share these with you on this episode, as well as we're going to kick off with a self-empowerment audit. And I'm going to share with you one of my favorite mantras, which is a mind tool or an affirmation that is so useful for us as women to develop our muscle of self-empowerment and self-trust, specifically self-trust. And I did a free webinar prior to this series called the Empowerment Boost, which was to get us all G'd up for this series, and this was the most popular tool as the women join me live on that free workshop. And I'm going to post the link to it in the comments if you want to download the replay, where I share with you 5 self-empowerment tools that you can use at home, in the workplace, for your personal and professional lives, within your businesses. And I'm sharing one of the top ones with you at the end of this episode. So stay tuned for the summer series. So let us begin with what is self-empowerment. And since our last series for International Women's Day back in March, the last few months have gone super quickly. I've been a little bit distracted by a health issue that cropped up, not totally out of the blue. It's something that's been going on since 2022, and we're lucky enough here in the UK to have the NHS, despite all the pressures that it's under. And, you know, I was given the kind of advice of watch and wait. It should just sort itself out. It's not something that sorted itself out and had escalated a little bit. So I freaked out. And also, particularly as someone who deems my lifestyle to be pretty healthy and stress levels being pretty low, and, you know, nourishing myself with the work that I do, the food that I eat. I gave up smoking many years ago. I still like a glass of wine and all of that stuff. But I felt a sense of not being in control of what was happening to my body, which is a reality many of us face when we are in our 40s and 50s and beyond that. And some of us, if we're unlucky, you know, way earlier than that, particularly for lots of women, you know, with women's health issues, which are massively under-researched, and mine falls into that bracket as well, which is kind of typical for the work that I do and all of that stuff. But the thing that I decided to do was to empower myself and really arm myself with knowledge to decide on the next right action. And that was prior to getting the results and the reality of where I was really at. And, you know, it was kind of something I was wishing I'd done 2 years before, when it first cropped up in 2022. But actually I was super distracted at the time with my father's health as well. And, you know, us being in a position of empowering ourselves with the knowledge of what was and wasn't occurring with him, which was actually, you know, a really serious medication issue. And I raised with, you know, his healthcare team at the time, had we known the side effect of this particular drug that he'd been given, his health wouldn't have declined in the way that it did. So what's really important here is this issue of self-empowerment, and also how many of the institutions, the patriarchal or even colonial style institutions, don't necessarily empower their patients, their clients, with the real knowledge for us to then really decide what happens next. Many of you know that I used to be a lawyer in the criminal justice system, and it was something that, I really tried to do, is empower my clients with as much information and knowledge as possible, so we can make a decision, so they can make a decision as to the right course of action for them. And it's something that runs through in my coaching work, in, allowing much, much deeper insights for the women that I support to come up so they can make those empowered choices. And it's all about choice, because self-empowerment is what gives us a sense of control and power over our lives, over our businesses, over our careers, over our health, our relationships, our finances. There's so many elements that's threaded through that we need to feel that sense of empowerment about. And, taking my health issue, I managed to download a book actually from America, which gave me a real holistic synopsis of what was going on potentially with my body. And while the watch and wait had not worked for me, despite being, relatively healthy woman for my age, and I then decided to hire a nutritionist, and a nutritionist who had experienced something similar to me, and specialized in women's health and all of that stuff. So I really empowered myself to make some balanced choices as to what happened next. I wasn't going to be told what happened next by the medical profession, as amazing as they are. I wanted to be fully aware and empower myself. So one of the first parts of empowering ourselves is books, right? Reading, discovering, finding out. And then, if we feel called to, is bringing that professional on board to help us to make those empowered choices. And one of the books that I'm going to share with you, the first one, because I'm going to share them with you in ascending order, in terms of complexity and things like that. The first one is actually a book that I tell not everybody, it depends where they are in their self-empowerment, personal development, spiritual journey, whatever you want to call it, is, sometimes I might get an email from someone, and if they're in a particular state of mind, I recommend them to read this first book. But before we do that, because I'm getting really carried away, let's start with a quick self-empowerment audit of where you are feeling you are at in your empowerment right now. So having that sense of control and power over your life. And you could break this up into over your business, career, health, finances, relationships, if you feel that you want to do that. And as I kicked off this episode, we've also had the elections, and there's been a lot of us feeling like no matter who we vote for, there's not going to be the real change and the heart-based leadership that we are all really shouting out for and needing. So the question to you for your self-empowerment audit, which we also do on the workshop, which you can grab signing up in the link in the comments below, is on the scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the highest and most empowered you've ever felt in your life, your business, your career, your health, your finances, your relationships, your politics, whatever it might be. You can do all of them if you want. How empowered are you feeling right now? So 10 is the highest, 1 is the lowest. And this is a really important thing to do every now and then. And me using my health as an example, and I'm not going to overshare and go into details, like if you come into a retreat with me or work with me one-to-one or see me somewhere and have a chat, I'm pretty open, but I don't necessarily agree with sharing that on social media and all of those kind of things, is that, I felt this sense of anxiety and doom pending this appointment that I had in April. And it's because I felt a lack of empowerment. I didn't really know what was going on and what I could do to kind of slow things down and change things. And, not to worry, I'm totally fine. But yeah, so I needed to empower myself. So I was, I would say after that appointment I had back in April, I was like, on a like 2 out of 10 feeling empowered. And, that has ramped up and ramped up and ramped up as I have taken control and educated myself and got the support from people that are more educated than me, and accountability and all of that stuff, which is so important. Why we A, read books, and B, we get support from empowered professionals. I believe in service-based businesses. That's why I do what I do. And that's why I've had coaching before and other professionals helping me. So yes, answer those questions for yourself. You may want to hit pause, come back to this, and then I'm going to dive into these 3 books. The first one, as I said, I'm sharing them with you in the ascending order of difficulty, of complexity, of, how empowered or disempowered you may be feeling at the moment. And if you're feeling super disempowered and you're having a challenging time in a particular area, because, and the reason I share all of the areas for us as women is because I'm going to make a sweeping assumption, but that comes from my professional experience of supporting women leaders such as yourself for the past nearly 9 years now, is that we don't separate all these things out very easily. So if one of them is falling down somewhere, it will likely impact everything else. So if we are struggling with one area, it has a knock-on effect with everything. So we have to look at all of it. And that's particularly if we're running businesses or positions of leadership and you have a team that's relying on you. If you're not feeling very empowered in your health, it's going to come across, potentially with how you manage your team or what it is that you're bringing forward in your business and all of that stuff. So this book, number 1, is The Power of TED, The Empowerment Dynamic by David Emerald, is absolutely key. And it was a really good reminder to me re-picking up that book, which I found in the attic after I'd moved house also in 2022 and had lots of things all over the place, and I wanted to recommend it to someone. I thought actually it'd be really great to share these, and I reread parts of it to myself. And what really stood out with this book, which as I said is something that I recommend people read before they have any coaching, because coaching is all about empowerment and moving forward and orientating ourselves to a future vision. And using my health as an example, the future vision of where it is that I want to be, instead of focusing on the problem and how it is that it's presented itself, is the empowerment dynamic reminds us of victim orientation versus creator orientation. And it's written as a children's book for grown-ups. It's super easy. One of the reasons I love doing this series in the summer is because we might have some time off. You can go and read this, by a beach or whilst having time off with the kids, whilst they're playing in the park, whatever's happening for you. Is that when we're in victim orientation, which is the reason that I recommend this book before anyone has coaching with me, if I sense that's where someone's at, is that when we're on victim orientation, we're focused on the problem. The problem is glaring and we can spotlight the problem and it can become bigger, and our empowerment can go down to that 2 out of 10, as I mentioned, and that will motivate us to create changes. It will motivate us for quite a short period of time as the problem starts to kind of, demotivate us. And as I said, we spotlight it and it becomes bigger and we become a victim of the problem. And the book really highlights the victim drama triangle, which many of you will be familiar with. And we might notice that we do this in particular areas of our life more than others. And it takes us in the second half of the book to creator orientation, where instead we are focused on being the creator of our reality and our experience. And we're focused instead on the vision of what it is that we want to create. And that keeps us focused and more motivated for much longer and much more excited within our energy. Now, I'm also studying a course this year and more to come within that, but we were talking about on the course how racing drivers, when they're training, are trained to focus not on the barrier. They literally have someone sitting there moving their head so they focus on the grass verge. And that keeps them on the racing track by focusing on the vision of where it is that they want to go. They want to be the fastest at that race instead of focusing on the barrier, which means they crash straight on into it. So what we're focusing on and where we're placing our attention is so critical to how it is that we move forward and how it is that empowered that we are feeling. So if your self-empowerment audit, some of the numbers were a bit low, how can you move your focus from the problem into the vision of what it is that you want to create? Was one of the reasons why I hired a nutritionist, which might be one of the reasons that you consider working with a coach, because they help you to focus on the vision and not the problem itself, which is one of the massive distinctions between coaching and therapy as well, although there's some crossover. So number 2 is the universe has your back. Now, this is a Hay House book by Gabrielle Bernstien, and I read this twice back in 2016 because I really needed to have acceptance, surrender, and trust of where it was that I found myself. I'd left legal some 18 months before. I had started a coaching business. I was in trust sometimes and not others. And this is a great book to remind us of the spiritual laws, the universal laws that are there, and what happens when we have trust, even in the problems that occur, that they have messages for us to adjust things until they become bigger problems. And one of my favourite quotes in the book is, all obstacles are detours in the right direction. So again, it takes us out of that victim orientation. Instead of, something bad's happened, creating drama around it, spotlighting on the problem, it really is, where can I change my direction and orientation? Because really our empowerment is about orientation and what it is that we're focused on. And this is a great book for reminding us of the little messages and signs that we can keep an eye out of for, and having a bit of fun on the journey and a bit of faith as well, which again, in the bigger picture, in terms of elections and the state of the world, at the moment with genocide and wars and climate change and so much division between two sides of things that just seems to be increasing, is to remind ourselves to have a little faith, a little fun on the journey, and remind ourselves that all obstacles are detours in the right direction. And what if we focus on the vision of where even humanity needs to go, how women can lead humanity to a better place, and we all have our part to play within that. And we're going to hear from some amazing guests for this series who are doing their incredible bit in the world. Then we are much more likely to create that vision. So that was complexity level number 2. We then have number 3, which is Untethered Soul. The Untethered Soul, A Journey Beyond Yourself by Michael A.Singer. He also wrote The Surrender Experiment. So whilst we talk about self-empowerment, us having a sense of control, we have to balance our sense of control with surrendering, being aware of what we can control and what we can't control. If we try and control all the variables, that's a pretty clunky, tight-fisted, anxious, stiff place to be, which means we lose our flow. And this book I was reading on my very first retreat that I hosted in Morocco in 2017. I did a photo shoot, my first photo shoot out there, and I was reading it, and then I lost it, and I was really annoyed because I was literally having so many aha moments, like mouth dropping. This is like a life-changing book, but beware, you have to be ready for it. You've got to have the headspace for it. It really is a book that when the student is ready, the teacher appears, and this book is a teacher. 100% a teacher. And I then refound it in lockdown, in the front pocket thing that you get in the suitcase, because I was clearing out the cupboard under the stairs where we dump everything. And we're going to be talking a little bit about empowering ourselves through minimalism on the next episode. And I found it with the bookmark still in it, and I sat on the sofa and I carried on reading it, and it was in the perfect place. I was ready for that next chunk of depth of that book. Now, it starts off with us talking about conscious awareness, which is really about how we create awareness of things that we were not aware of before. That's all conscious awareness is, I say in inverted commas, and that's what really spirituality is, you know, understanding that there is more to what we see with the human eye. And it starts with that and takes us through a journey of understanding the level of the depth and complexity of our hearts over our heads, and us recognizing that we are not that little voice in our head. We are so much bigger than that. Our consciousness is bigger than that. And we build our lives around kind of wounds, and he describes it as a thorn in our arm, you know, when it gets all nasty and mucky that we kind of don't want anyone to touch. So, you know, we won't do certain things or go to certain places, or, you know, and then it becomes more and more painful and uncomfortable, which is a lot of, you know, midlife crisis. Most of this podcast is, you know, for women in their 40s and 50s. And that's where those, you know, mechanisms that we create for ourselves that, you know, have worked in terms of defending ourselves, protecting ourselves previously, suddenly become not so useful to us anymore. So this is a brilliant book for busting through patterns, which is the real level of depth, the work that I do with clients that are really holding you back. That's where therapy hasn't worked. That's where business coaching hasn't worked. You've still got stuff keeping you stuck. And if you want to explore coaching with me, you know, it's also reading that book, or feeling like you're almost ready to read a book of that level, because we really go there with this stuff and with the depth. So they are the 3 books: TED, The Empowerment Dynamic, The Universe Has Got Your Back, and Untethered Soul, in ascending order, in the order of complexity of the concepts that are in those books. So I hope you enjoy those books over the summer, as well as this She Rebel Radio series. To conclude, it's fair to say that all of us can feel disempowered at times. It's not a constant thing, even as empowered women, that we feel empowered all of the time, but it's what we do about it that really matters. And I wanted to summarise these steps for you. The first thing that we can do is to educate ourselves. Secondly, we can get support in whatever area we're feeling disempowered within. Thirdly, is knowing the difference between what it is that we can and cannot control. Number 4 is we can conduct a regular empowerment audit, as I shared with you at the beginning of this podcast episode. How empowering would it be to do that, you know, once every 6 months or once every quarter? And finally, empowerment is really a question of orientation and what it is that we're focused on. When we focus on the vision and not the problem, we really begin to empower ourselves from somewhere that is quite indestructible. I'm going to share with you a promise before we go, which came from the Empowerment Boost online workshop that I hosted to G us up for the She Rebel Radio series. The link is available in the show notes if you would like the replay of that. And it's about self-trust. Again, one of the biggest reasons that women often work with me is because that self-trust is missing or has been challenged somewhere. And as a collective of women, our trust in women is challenged as a collective due to our history. women are not trusted as much as men in positions of authority, running businesses. I'm not going to go through all the statistics with you. We've talked about this on She Rebel Radio, and that can really impact our self-empowerment and trust within ourselves. And, this mantra brought up the feels for the emotion for women on the She Rebel Radio series, or the workshop, sorry. And it's simply looking in the mirror and saying out loud to yourself, or saying out loud to yourself every morning. And this is particularly if you're doing something, counter status quo out there in the world. You're really wanting to change things up, which is what we need to be doing, leading from heart-based leadership as women. And it's saying this to yourself: I trust me, I validate me, I back me. I trust me, I validate me, I back me. That's a super powerful mantra or mind tool or affirmation you can use just to remind yourself, if other people aren't backing you, your decisions, or you're not getting the finances in your business, or the clients, or, your partner's questioning you, or family or loved ones, or whatever it is, that you can trust you can validate you, and you can back you. Big love from me. I'm looking forward to diving into the rest of the series, and I hope this episode has amplified your self-empowerment from a 2, 3, 5 or 6 up to a 7, 8, 9 or even a 10. Thank you for listening to She Rebel Radio. If this episode has inspired you, please pass it on and share with at least one other incredible woman. Don't forget to also hit subscribe and leave us a review. You can find out more about me and my work at lulumins.com or on most social media platforms.